Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language.
Hey everybody, welcome. It's the Analytics Power Hour, and this is episode 259. You know, how many times have we seen news articles that make data claims, and once you actually read the article, well, it seems either just like different or overblown, or maybe didn't really come to the same conclusion. And as analysts, you know, we have to come up with representations for our data that summarize key points and takeaways in an easy to understand way. And so, like, connecting those two things, we have to a lot of times give people the headlines, and are we doing a good job of it? So we thought we'd do a little experiment. We could sharpen our skills by taking a look at some actual headlines, do a little commentary and analysis, and see what we come up with. So in our best impression of Nicholas Fane, if you know, you know, here we go. Do you actually know who that is, Tim?
No.
Oh, okay.
Of course not.
It was a Fred Armisen.
That was a polite laugh.
Yeah, okay. It was a polite. I thought it was a knowing laugh, so I was excited.
No.
Nope. I'll explain it. Nicholas Fane was a Fred Armisen character on SNL who would come on Weekend Update and read news article headlines, but he never actually read them. And I love that sketch. Anyways, but let me introduce my co-host today, Val Kroll. How is the Windy City?
It is actually really windy today, which is not even why it's called the Windy City, but it is quite windy here. So happy to be here.
It does get windy. Maybe we'll see an article or two about that. And Julie Hoyer, how's Cleveland?
Oh, Cleveland's Cleveland.
I was going to say, how's the mistake by the lake? But then I was like, they're past that now.
You know, they won a recent game.
They did.
I guess
That's
we can't
right.
call them that this week.
Yes, that's right. We won't say no more. And Tim Wilson, how is Columbus?
It's also kind of windy today.
I don't have anything snappy for Columbus. It's a great town, though. And I'm Michael Helbling, holding down the South here in Atlanta. Everybody, howdy doody. All right, let's jump into it. I was about to say everybody go vote, and I was like, this is coming out at the end of the month, dummy. So
yeah, Tim would have strangled you.
Howdy doody.
So that's where you landed.
Yeah, everybody.
Is that your verbal pick?
It was the build up, the silent. Now I have to say something.
So wrong. All right.
Okay. Actually crying. Headlines. Just give me the headline. That's what I say to everybody who's giving me data. Just give me the headlines, because I'm ill-tempered and short with everyone. Okay, how do we want to kick this off? We can just maybe go around. Let's share one, and we can talk about it. I think it'll be kind of fun.
Sounds good.
Who wants to start?
So, mine, actually, I feel like this was one of the early ones that I saw that kind of helped inspire this episode. So I'm excited to get all of your reactions to this. Okay, the headline is, the most streamed TV shows are almost entirely reruns.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
it feels like there's a lot more of rerun content than there is new content. So the population that you're drawing from is such that would likely be true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, my first thought was literally, duh.
well, but I mean, not necessarily, because depending on the platform and things like that, like, you know, streaming platforms are always coming out with new content as well, so they're trying to make it popular. But that's interesting on a certain level that it's mostly reruns that people watch.
Was there a specific platform, Julie, that it was referring to, or just like in general?
So it was interesting. So this actually came through from a newsletter that I subscribe to. Tim does too. But it was on Instagram. So they post like these headlines. So it comes through with this picture, and I'm not going to give away the TV show because I'm going to make you guys guess what it is. And that's the headline that it says. And then I swipe through to the next. No. And I swipe through to the next picture. And it didn't give any other detail of like specific streaming platform, Val, to your point. It just had a Bloomberg's like ranked by Nielsen's weekly top 10. That's the only other detail it had, is like the title of the data, and even the actual comments down below. It didn't give much more of like streaming services they got this from, where the data came from. Like,
if it was all like the Me
tricky.
TV that's on in your dentist's office.
Right. Does that count? Yeah. So it said minutes spent streaming shows while ranked in Nielsen's weekly top 10. And then the bar chart is by billions of minutes.
Oh my.
That's quite a scale. That's quite an act.
Yes.
Well, but there is kind of I mean, like Netflix has made news periodically as to what data they release and what data they don't. And Nielsen has kind of, it's periodically in the news as to what they can and they can't track. So there's a part of that where that sounds like it's being stated as like, here's an absolute fact without sourcing, but it's really, there are a bunch of assumptions based on what data they have under the hood. So it's like, it's a punchy headline that doesn't necessarily answer the, what the services are, if you're excluding a service that skews very far away from original content, or, then that would be, but there was, Suits had a moment where it was kind of up there. Friends has kind of historically been up there. So,
Any other guesses?
Yeah, it's got to be like, some nostalgia itch, like some of the ones that Tim was just talking about. I feel like, I don't know. The Office was a good guess, Michael. I can't think of something better than that.
Yeah.
And no, pregnant pauses are great on a podcast.
Editing.
We'll fix that in post, Tim.
All right. It is NCIS.
There you go.
What?
Ooh. I mean, there's like 10 different NCISs.
Yeah.
See?
People watch that show?
But now I definitely question, because if they were ranking it, that is with a time frame and a subset, because I absolutely guarantee that Friends and Suits and The Office, depending on how you slice it. So that wasn't in the headline though. They were just But the inventory of content when you've got so many NCISs that have run for a decade.
Question for you, Julie. Did they talk about the comparison between the reruns versus new content in terms of streaming minutes?
Yeah, so I'll break it down what I was able to find. It was actually kind of hard to track this down. It ended up, they just said per Bloomberg at the end of it. And so luckily I was able to find the real article on Bloomberg. And it was kind of buried halfway down as like part of a larger topic. And what I found was that they said they were examining 3 years of Nielsen data tracking the most watched shows every week and different streaming services share of total TV viewing every month. So they were saying that this is one of the first times they looked at like streaming service data and like, I guess, non-streaming service data. But they were looking at Nielsen top 10 every month it says examining 3 years is what I'm taking. But to your point, they never said that they were kind of like controlling for this idea of, obviously reruns have been out longer, but top 10.
What the fuck is a rerun in a streaming? I mean, I watched.
Does it mean I watched it for the first time, or that it's like more than a year old? Like, I don't know how they're defining reruns.
Maybe it's syndicated.
Yeah, syndicated. That's what I was thinking.
So in other words, production has ceased on the show itself. Well, that's not true, because NCIS aren't they? Still
NCIS. I'm
still
sure they're up to
going.
like 20 versions now.
So they're a rerun. So they didn't say anything.
NCIS Poughkeepsie.
Does Mac's original content wind up going into syndication? Like, when does Game of Thrones become a rerun? So that's actually a rerun is literally
Well, Game of Thrones, that's not a good example, because that was scheduled. Those didn't all come out at once. So isn't it, if you're not watching it at the scheduled time it was released, isn't that considered a rerun?
Yeah, like if I record it and watch it, is that a rerun? No. I mean, they didn't say though. Is it a rerun to me, a rerun to them? I can't even say rerun anymore.
We're going to belabor the crap out of this, but literally a rerun is based on is over-the-air TV, that they are rerunning something that not at its original date. So I'm back to the like,
data.
like actually defining what a rerun is. I mean, there's the stuff that is obviously Gilligan's Island, The Office. Those would, sure, it stopped production. It was produced years ago. But I do think you get into what is their definition, and we've probably beaten this into the ground.
Well, so what's your favorite NCIS episode? Let's go around the horn.
Really?
I don't even
Listen
know.
to this, though.
Oh, you're just trolling me. Okay.
Yeah, just
Got
trolling. So get this, though. NCIS has, how do they say it? People have spent 11.4 million hours a week streaming NCIS since March of 2021. In other terms, roughly 11.4 million episodes a week is what they said. That was like further down in the article of NCIS, supposedly, by their measurements.
I'd like to think that's like 10,000 people with no life at all.
I used to definitely consume a lot of crime content as research for how I would evade my captor, because I'm so convinced that I'm going to get kidnapped someday. Because I'm telling you, you handle a narcissist very different than Tim's shaking his head than a sociopath. So I learned a lot.
This is great content, but mostly for our sister podcast, True Crime with Val.
We're 8 minutes into our first example.
True crime situations with Val.
All right, so then let's put an end to this one. Go around the horn. I say it is poorly written and suspicious.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
This myth is busted.
I give it 2 stars. Can we change our ratings? As
I like
Change our
it.
ratings.
Sure.
Yeah. I give it 4 Pinocchios. And yeah, no, I'd
Perfect.
say I agree. Like it lacks a little context, and so what it's trying to communicate to you is sort of getting a little bit lost in the shuffle. So that would be the takeaway I got. It sort of left me with more questions than answers. It's time to step away from the show for a quick word about Piwik Pro. Tim, tell us about it.
Well, Piwik Pro has really exploded in popularity and keeps adding new functionality.
They sure have. They've got an easy-to-use interface, a full set of features with capabilities like custom reports, enhanced e-commerce tracking, and a customer data platform.
We love running Piwik Pro's free plan on the podcast website, but they also have a paid plan that adds scale and some additional features.
Yeah, head over to Piwik.pro and check them out for yourself. You can get started with their free plan. That's Piwik.pro. And now let's get back to the show. All right, I'm going to do one that I think is pretty decent, actually. In this one, it says, nearly 5% of Americans don't have a bank account per latest 2021 data. So that's the headline. And then the story goes on to talk a little bit about, while this is the lowest number of unbanked people, since they've tracked that, it still represents about 5 million people in the country who don't have a bank account. So I thought that was actually a pretty good headline. It was not sensational. It was accurately stated what this data said and was pretty straightforward. I don't know. Thoughts, comments?
Julie's like, well, the format was supposed
So you mean
to be...
like not the purpose of this episode?
Oh, well, I've got others, Val. I've got others.
And Julie's like, so read the headline, get the reactions from everyone, and then give your take on it. So, okay,
Oh,
cool.
I just went ahead and gave my take on it right away.
You just
Sorry.
rolled right into it.
Jumped the gun there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, it sounds pretty solid. I have no reason to question it.
I mean, I trust you, Michael.
You said it so convincingly.
Yeah, I guess if you asked me like what percentage of Americans don't have a bank account, I don't know. It's kind of like, how many windows are in the city of Chicago kind of question. Like, I don't know how I would have backed into like what my gut would have said around that.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested to look at some of the source of how they track that. Like the absence of something being present is always harder to track. So I'd be interested to look at the source of data.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one.
It's so funny. It's like a decent headline, and we're like, yeah, okay. Okay, only do bad ones.
It's like, I learned something. I don't know. It was like a new fact.
Well, I mean, I suspect that is very, very low income people who are kind of paycheck to paycheck, and those are the ones who use the cash. And then it's the people who just don't trust, which is probably a much, much smaller percentage. So I could see that if the article, like something more useful that might be this is an increase or a decrease in people who are living so close to the edge that bank account, like they're living in the red and they're paying to live in the red because they're having to use paycheck cashing services or whatever. So to Val's point, the fact that it's just a number that's not necessarily anchored on something. To not belabor it, maybe I'll counter this with one that I'll just choose to segue to one that is more, the headline is "More teen girls smoke marijuana than boys now, study shows." And I'm going to go ahead and give the subheading was "Overall, the percentage of teens reporting marijuana use fell to 15.8% in 2021 from 23% in 2011." And this is an article that came out in the fall of 2024. Reactions? Headline, "More teen girls smoke weed than boys." Subheadline, "The overall percentage in a 10-year period from 2021 to 2011, from 2011 to 2021 fell from 23% to 15.8%.
And it was self-reported? Did I hear you say that in the headline?
It's not in the headline. It's actually from an annual school-based, self-administered online survey of U.S. middle and high school students conducted from January to May of this year, which is another odd bit of phrasing, but I'll withhold my judgment.
So they're asking them 10 years ago if they did?
Yeah, I think, well, it's an annual survey, so I think they do it every year. Their phrasing referred to this year, but it's reporting results of 2021 compared to 2011. And this was news that made the rounds in 2024.
I love that you guys are like parsing the time frames and data. In my head, I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's just because there's more people using edibles. They're just smoking it less. Like that's where my head went. That's so funny.
I mean,
Yeah.
no, I got a lot of thoughts on this one.
I think teen boys just lie to survey people, obviously. Yeah, I mean, right away, like the compare and contrast is sort of like raises my eyebrow a little bit. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, one, it seems like the lead would be that marijuana use dropped by 6%.
Yeah.
But on top of that, Val's point, the consumption. So I went to vaping versus, edibles, another way to consume marijuana. Vaping, I'm pretty sure over that span of time has like skyrocketed and then has all sorts of bumpy things. The fact that they're talking about this being a survey, like I know organizations close their books at the end of a quarter and then it takes them a few weeks to report results. I know there are macroeconomic indicators that it can take a few months to compile the data. If this is a fucking online survey, surely there's not a 3-year lag and that they're saying, oh, we just got the numbers in because it actually says, so in it says conducted from January to May of this year. But it's also, they're picking 2021. I don't know if you guys remember 2020, 2021, kind of fucked up period. So 2021, in theory, they were back, but I'm like, surveying middle school and high school students in 2021, like that is an atypical period. So it's stating these things. I mean, it does say a study says, so it's not necessarily stating it as fact. It does give precision of a 0.1% in the subheading, but it just overall, I was like, the study it's a nice longitudinal study. Like if you do this every year, but you cherry picked 2 points 10 years apart. I'm like, oh, if you plotted that by year, is it like super noisy? And you said, what are the points where there was a big spike up and a big spike down, and then report on that? Like that seemed like it totally could be happening big time. So the more that I thought about it, the more And the fact is, the difference between the girls and boys like wasn't that dramatic. It just, I'm like, that seems like the question I least have about this, and then everything within the article was just making me be like, yeah, this feels like absolute cherry picking of data and not considering external factors like different consumption methods, a pandemic that went with weird back to school stuff. So it,
you can't smoke weed in the school bathroom if your school is your home. It's a little harder.
True.
I mean, they said 2020. If they'd done 2020, I would have been like, come on. But 2021, I was like, that was, I mean, schools were back in, but I mean, I know from separates, I mean, there was massive swaths of kids like never showed back up. I'm like, I would wonder if the people who, once they had that year of remote schooling, didn't return, if maybe those would be in environments that would skew more heavily to smoking weed. Maybe. I mean, that's a theory. I don't have evidence on that. It just seemed like a very, very surface level kind of making statements. So
definitely,
there's my thoughts on that one. I think that means, Val, you're up.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try my best to stay focused on this one. All right. So here is a headline that was, why don't women use artificial intelligence?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
just
just blanket statement. Don't use it at all. Like, I'm pretty sure we could attest that. At least I myself have.
Why don't girls play video games? Like, that's a terrible. I mean, wow, interesting. Wow. Without knowing anything about the article, I would be like, what kind of question is that?
It was published in The Economist.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, that fly-by-night rag. Yeah, no, that's
that's hard. Like, okay, so what were they trying to say there?
I don't know. It feels clickbaity too, because they're like, just pose the question, hoping you'll click and read, instead of telling you.
So I feel like I saw some posts that I'm assuming were grounded in this. That the underlying was that some attempt to measure the rate. And it was showing that a lower percentage of women were using AI tools than men. And so this was a gross generalization. I have issues with some of the commentary on that as well. But because, it's clearly women. Like, you just classified half of the population and said they don't do something. So it's factually cannot be right, and it definitely looks like clickbait, which seems weird for The Economist. But
agreed. Any other thoughts before I share some of mine?
Give it to us.
Well, so I actually went to find the paper that was being referenced, and the paper is called Global Evidence on Gender Gaps in Generative AI. And so there's like Harvard Business School, Berkeley, Stanford, all got their names all over this. And basically it was a meta-analysis of 13 different studies. And none of these studies were aimed at looking at the gender gap between adoption. It just happened to be one of the different factors that was captured along the studies, some of them were in Kenya, some of them were in Spain. They were literally all over the globe about AI adoption. And so none of them were trying to demystify this. This was just a meta-analysis of them. But 26 countries were included. I mean, we don't even have to scroll down too far before they say, but there were exceptions. BCG had a study showing that women are 3% more likely to use AI than men in a sample of nearly 7,000 US tech employees. And so then it has like all these concessions. So it's basically saying, and a lot of these, we were able to find this, even though that wasn't the intention of the research, meaning that it wasn't even necessarily controlled for. And we also found some that weren't conveniently aligned with this headline. But we're gonna roll with that one, anyways.
Just gonna stick with the storyline. Wow, that's pretty blatant.
Stay away from that AI, ladies, please.
Yeah.
Don't even touch it.
And there was actually
also another one you caught in there was that, like, it says, why don't women use AI? Which why don't women use artificial intelligence? And then the study immediately went to generative AI, which is absolutely a small subset, not to mention defining use.
Well, there was another sentiment in here which I really loved that was asking, why wouldn't women want to use generative AI to advise? Because it can help them automate tasks to help manage work and family time demands, which I loved.
Wow. So some of the people meta-analysis were from the dudes from the 1950s.
Yeah, apparently men have figured out all the use cases for how to handle the burdens of their home.
Listen, little lady, you can have it look up the recipe for a perfect martini for me when I get home from work. Because it's been a hard day doing my prompt engineering.
I feel like most of, or any commentary at this point is very dangerous for me. So.
It was, I mean, there were some points in there, it was trying to make the point that like, just giving people access to AI isn't going to get them to adopt the technology, which like, I think we all could have come to that conclusion before. But a couple of these studies were just about, WhatsApp for Business released an AI function, like a feature within the tool, and fewer women happened to click on it. I'm like, so this is about, we're painting some broad strokes about our ability to adopt or use or leverage the software just because we didn't happen to click on a new feature. So anyways, it seemed like quite the jump.
But that one does seem like the applicability to, I mean, that you broaden it to where, there's just something collected on as a matter of course on the various ways we do lead forms. And then somebody gets asked to do, maybe a junior analyst or maybe even just, a marketer says, I'm going to do this comparison. And look, this is 55% and this is 44%. And they jump to, like the massive thing that is missing there is that you kind of hit it on at the very beginning, that because that wasn't the research question being asked, and now you're trying to repurpose this data, it just like immediately should trigger a million red flags. And then by the time it gets filtered through to the headline writer, like it's just stating something like it's not a rhetorical question. It's just like it's implying a fact that is so far from a fact, and it's so vague that it's like horribly irresponsible.
Yeah.
So
and just
that's
to
a good one.
belabor the point a little bit, Tim, but it is interesting drawing the parallels of like when people have an actual designed experiment, study, methodology, whatever, and then your stakeholders ask you to like get other insights than the main one it was made to get. And people are so like, loose about the idea of, if I design the study, then everything about it in comparison, like, is fair game. And we know that's not true, but I do think people obviously fall into that trap.
Which seems like, I mean, that would be the sort of thing that if there was, it seems like things happen around gender. Certainly, I think stuff happens with kids or different backgrounds or different things where in the social sciences, they are used to saying we should field research to answer this. And if we field a well-designed study, it does not have to be horribly cost prohibitive, but can give us a pretty solid answer without doing necessarily like a field experiment. Although that sort of research is only going to give you the what is happening, not the why, which is maybe the other part.
Exactly.
Is like, this is asking for causality. And I'm sure there's like speculative garbage in the article, but those are all like, one, you're starting with a premise that is so flawed, and then you're trying to speculate on the causality about something that who the hell knows if it's true or not. Wow. Okay. Well, cool. Triggered. Well done.
Yeah, it seems like, definitely the article could have had a much different headline and been very useful. Like, is there a gender gap in generative AI usage or something like that? And just ask the question. And that's a very intriguing question. And I think a lot of people would want to dig in and understand that better. But it's sort of like, why don't women use AI? It's like,
God damn it.
It's like, we built it just for them. Like, come on.
Help them manage their households.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
That's a good one.
All right, I'm going to pass the stick back to Julie.
All right, me. Okay. Next headline. The order in which you acquire diseases could affect your life expectancy. New research.
Well, I'll make sure that I acquire them in the right order after reading this.
It's always the last one you acquire that kills you, you know?
Oh, damn, it got me. You know?
Should have got this one first, darn it.
Yeah.
It's like, the thing you're looking for is always in the last place you look. Oh, my gosh. Sorry. That's funny.
What is the underlying idea? I mean, yeah, the earlier you get a really serious life-threatening disease, the more likely it is to kill you, right? I assume.
Order.
Or maybe it's like how like you can get chicken pox when you're younger and like the virus is always in you and that's what shingles is and things like that. So like if you didn't get chicken pox, so it's not like you're going to get shingles first when you're 6. So the order bit of that is what's interesting to me because like, I mean, there's so much now about like customized
You should
medicine.
get adult onset diabetes before you're 12.
Yeah.
We'll have so much time to try to handle that.
The thing going through my head right now is multi-disease attribution, you know? It's like, which disease was influential? But then which one
first
really
touch,
caused,
last touch.
Yeah, first touch.
Yeah, attribution models for disease.
Multi-touch disease attribution. Oh, man.
So,
Yeah,
you all mirrored my first reaction pretty well. So, reading this article, it gives a lot more detail of why I think our reactions are valid. So it started off saying, pretty much just in general, it said like, using statistical models, we examined order and timing of developing psychosis, diabetes, and congestive heart failure in patients of the same age, sex, and area deprivation, and the related impact on their life expectancy. So that was like the first explanation piece I could find. First thing I thought was, why those 3 things and only those 3 things?
Yeah.
And they didn't really mention those 3 things in the headline. I'm like, that's a really interesting pick. But yeah, those sound pretty serious. So not just diseases. Like, ends up they were only looking at, how do they phrase it? They were only looking at multiple long-term conditions. So not just diseases, long-term conditions, and the only 3 they looked at were the 3 I listed. So then they ended up looking at they did say that they had a pretty like robust data set, but even so, and it was like over 20 years and whatnot, but even so they ended up looking at the different combinations of just having 1, just having 2, having all 3, and then in what order as well. And it was kind of crazy. They said, and they didn't mention the exact method either. I did try to find that and they never listed that anywhere, but pretty much the results were saying that congestive heart failure is the one that cuts your life expectancy the most, which I don't know if I'm surprised by that, if the list of 3 options.
That's a headline right there.
And they said, so if you get that 1/3, that cuts the most life off of your expectancy.
It's always the last one that gets you.
Yeah. Yeah, the last one. That's what I thought. I was like, it's always the last one that gets you, and the most acute, I would say, maybe sounded like congestive heart failure,
psychosis, and
Diabetes.
and diabetes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one surprising result that they did outline was that you have a longer life expectancy if you have diabetes and psychosis rather than just psychosis. And they hypothesize that it's because if you have diabetes, you're seeing healthcare more regularly, which might actually help you better manage it. So I was like, oh, that is actually really interesting. Never would have thought that. But the big bad congestive heart failure, that was, I felt a little obvious.
Counterintuitively, if you have psychosis, you should just eat a lot of sugar so that you get diabetes, because then you would. So anyway, I don't mean to make light of some of these illnesses. That's not what I mean to do. But,
yeah. But it was interesting. They talked a lot about the order, and in the end, they were saying, oh, it doesn't matter the order, but they did find more about the combination. But I still am just wondering why they chose the heart failure piece and like that combination of 3. And by the end of the article, what I did find not reassuring, but like a better thing to focus on was the fact that they were saying this method that they analyze this data with could be applied to different diseases, different combinations of things, and it could be really helpful for different programming and knowing if someone gets one disorder, should you be on the lookout for another specifically. And I was like, oh, that seems way more helpful than like calling out necessarily the top 3. And then again, I thought the headline was a little misleading once I got into it.
So that they've got, if you take the sequencing out of it and you take the combinations of each single, each had 2, each had 3, I also like, what is the scale? Like, what is the actual broader occurrence in the world? Like, if you get it down to where, yeah, this tiny little sliver, it's really, really bad, but it's a tiny little sliver of people. Like, there's part of me wonders if there is some sampling error risk. Like finding ones who only had 1 was presumably easier than finding people who had 2, which was easier than finding people who had 3. And then you put the sequencing for 2 or 3. That seems like you inherently would wind up with pretty small numbers that you're then trying to draw inferences about the whole population. And
yeah,
somewhere it feels like there might be some oddly survivorship bias risk, but I can't quite frame what it is. Like if you had a couple of these and that meant that you actually were so much more likely to die that you actually were never like eligible to be found in the study because they were only looking at people who were 18 to 45 or something. I don't know, but when you're trying to look at those combinations of factors and you're dealing with a sample, things get pretty dicey because you want to make sure your sample is actually reflective of the population.
Well, then what happened to
definitely.
cancer and Alzheimer's and...
Yeah, like did they look at people that had other ones? That's a good point too.
It seems like they just sort of like, well, we've got data for these 3, so
exactly.
we'll just
yeah.
do
well,
this
and that's
analysis.
what it felt like to me. Like after 20 years, we have to find something to report on. Like there's got to be a headline in here somewhere.
As an analyst, I think we've all sort of felt that pain before. We've got to report something back.
There's all this data.
Your marketing campaign has cancer. Yeah, that's a good one.
Corporate popcorn?
Yeah,
Corporate
we'll go
popcorn.
with Tim.
Oh, okay. So this one may be a little bit of a cheat because I found it because it had come out that somebody had like busted it. It's not quite a headline, but a few years ago it really made the rounds in the media, and it became a Netflix documentary called Live to 100: Secrets of the Blue Zones.
Oh.
You familiar with that?
Yeah.
I'm literally planning to move to Loma Linda, California, which is a blue zone.
Is it a blue zone? I thought the blue zones were all like...
No, there's one like in the middle of...
There is in California.
There's
Yeah.
one in the... Okay. Thoughts on the on that?
Well, it wasn't a headline, and I don't know. I'm not familiar, so no thoughts.
I mean, so the blue zones were places that people would live wildly longer, and then so then it became a whole like, well, let's figure out what's unique about those different countries and regions, and therefore we will find the secret to longevity.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were real, so I just started eating a lot more olive oil and feta cheese. Not really.
Mediterranean diet.
Yeah, just Kalamata olives, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes a little bit to what we were just talking. Like, my first reaction is I want to believe it's true as well, because you're like, how are large numbers of each population that they looked at, like, living that long? But at the same time, like, I don't know, how do you really control for factors to to prove some of the things they're observing are the cause of it? Like, I don't know. Or is it, how do they know it's not a combination of a bunch of things, some of the things you're not aware of, and it's just the one thing they kind of focus in on the show, like the walking. I think it was an Italian village where the walking, they like really honed in on walking. And I think in Japan it was similar. It was like sitting down and getting up, even at 100, like they sit on the floor, and obviously some of their diet there, but I guess those are my first questions I would have.
So no one has gone to, maybe it's just bad data. So there's this guy named Justin Newman won an Ig Nobel this year because he started digging into what those blue zones were, and he posited that, a lot of these are in these regions where like record keeping is shitty. So there are lots of people who show up as being old, and then if you're getting any sort of check because, grandpa lives with you and you're getting some from your government and they die, like, do you want to report that they're gone, or do you want that to keep coming in? So it's actually like late age and death record keeping is actually pretty hard. Like, and people will kind of keep getting a pension check. So basically a confounding variable that it's actually really tough to track when people die. Having said that, I mean, so people went straight to applying, causation. What are the things? Is it walking long distances? Is it eating this? Is it having familial connections? I kind of wonder, even this Justin Newman's like study, I think raised like, these are like some good questions. People just accept it as fact, and he has some serious questions about the data. I'm not 100% sure that his counter is entirely valid either. I think a lot of things that were found, people were like, yeah, if you move more, you'll live longer. So there was a degree of, there were causal factors, but it was one of those where you could find enough things that explain, and then you could kind of tell a story that started to completely make sense. But I'm not sure I entirely buy into the debunking, but I also think it is pretty funny that entire like companies and books have been written and they just like accept it as fact. And I think he did find some pretty definitive records of saying, yeah, people aren't living to be that old. That's just, you're just looking at the government record keeping in some of these countries. It's just not that great, and they're fine with it. So there you go.
I was not expecting that one.
I thought it was some like death becomes her kind of situation.
Yeah, what a downer.
Oh,
jeez.
Michael, you got another one?
I do. All right, here you go. This time I'll wait and get reactions. Here we go.
Do it right this time.
Here's the headline. Thousands of cleaning supplies may contain substances linked to health problems.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
They're literally full of chemicals.
Like the poison control, like Mr. Yuck stickers over everything under my kitchen cabinet.
It's like thousands.
I mean, I was planning on drinking all of it, so I'm really thankful that this headline's really cutting me off at the pass.
Could be harmful. Who'd have thought?
Wow.
Where was that published?
That was from CNN. So, yeah, I was, while looking for source material, I was like, USA Today and CNN are good areas for me to wander around to try to find bad headlines. So, yeah, I feel like that one is sort of like no duh. Like, if you presented a headline like that in a business meeting, people would be like, yeah. It's sort of like, the more sales we make, the more revenue we get. It's like, wow, you're never invited to this meeting ever again.
Yeah.
Try to avoid that. But it's interesting because in the article, they basically were like, yeah, these are dangerous and you should be careful with them. But don't go throwing away all your cleaning supplies because that's bad for the environment to waste them. Just read the labels.
And don't not clean your house because...
You should clean more. It's a weird piece, honestly.
Spray those chemicals everywhere.
It's like, so what am I supposed to do? I'm just supposed to freak out about how the chemicals might be hurting me, but don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then read all the labels very carefully. And then try to educate yourself on the top 500 terrible chemicals that might be in a cleaning product. It's like, really? There's a website they talk about that have like a safe use, like I think the EPA has like a this is safe to use type of registry or something that people can apply to. So if you don't know, you can look that up on your phone in the grocery store.
But it does bring out, it's funny to like map that to a marketing context. Like there are trade-offs. Like, do you want to not clean stuff? Do you want to clean stuff, but it's like takes forever because it's a horribly tedious because it's totally organic and it only does 70% good of the job? Or do you want to clean it like really effectively, really quickly? Like they're different benefits. So they're trade-offs, and it is very easy to say, let's paint state something that is fairly obvious, but I can imagine in a business context where you find something that is short-term oriented, doesn't actually consider the counter side of it. And it's kind of hoped like, oh, I found this thing, but that's just a slice of the consideration.
But also, I guess now that I'm thinking about it a little more, digesting the initial shock of the headline, is I think also, in what way is it dangerous? Like, obviously, any chemical in a potent enough form isn't good for you, but like, is it don't spray it on your tongue, don't inhale the mist, don't touch it 10 minutes after, don't touch it at all? Like, in what form or in what contact is it really like, this is dangerous for you, but it would be good to use on a counter or something really dirty, right? And then you wipe it away, and 10 minutes later, it's like done its job and it's neutralized. Like, I don't know. You start to get a lot of follow-up questions.
There's thousands of cleaning supplies, Julie, and they may be dangerous. So
maybe.
So just watch out.
Watch out.
I mean, as someone who grew up in a household that every Sunday smelled like bleach, Comet, Pine Sol, and Pledge, when my husband and my daughter was born, went through a phase of like, well, let's clean everything with what is it, red wine vinegar or white vinegar? I was like,
oh yeah,
hard pass. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So bring on the harsh cleaning supplies. I'll deal with those health problems because they're going to be in the right sequence and I'll be fine.
That's right.
But you also have to not mix the wrong ones together too. The article did talk about that. So
right, bleach and ammonia, right? Makes that was because that was so bad. When I was in college, we had to clean the grease traps in the kitchen like twice a year, and so we would take them. We would go outside because we were going to be responsible. We're like, wow, if you put those together and they're like brutally toxic, like that probably cleans the shit out of the grease. So we would definitely take two like big garbage buckets, put hot water into it, and then just go all in with the ammonia and bleach and kind of stand back. We had gas masks, I think, too, but we're outside. We're fine. So,
oh my gosh.
Explains
think
a lot,
what he might
it?
have been, folks.
Here he is, reading headlines on a podcast.
That's right. Wow.
I could have been somebody.
I mean, I'll admit to being curious about it, but I never was like, hey, let's do that. Because like, I always got the warning from my parents, like, never mix these two chemicals.
Yeah, we were definitely more of the like, oh, come on.
You're going to die if you mix these two chemicals. We're like, okay. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we had gas masks to clean the kitchen twice a year, I mean, there was lots of other stuff going on that was...
Yeah, I had them at the ready.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And they were good ones. They were full on...
Army surplus.
Yeah. I think the other thing that stands out is like this is a needlessly sort of like a scary headline too. It's sort of like our whole website is broken and no one can use it right. It's like, okay, that's not helpful at all, right? It's you're not really
a broken
getting
link
us
in
anywhere.
the footer. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
It's like, okay, specifics.
Or shout out to Ezekiel. Yes, the social link posts on our website still do not link to the specific episode post. Can't figure that out, but it's a known bug. One of many known bugs on our website.
Right. Still less bugs than GA4. All right. All right. Val, do you have another one? We can sneak another one in.
Sure. So when I read this one, it just felt very suspicious, I'll say. So this one came out earlier this year. It says Google delays third-party cookie deprecation likely until 2025. So I'll get your thoughts.
Val
Likely.
always wanted to talk about third-party cookies.
I thought they gave up on deleting those altogether.
That's why that headline sounds kind of unbelievable, doesn't it?
Oh, okay. So I was like, was I misinformed?
Well, it sounds like assertive in the beginning, and then it throws in the likely, and it kind of threw me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a throwaway. Okay, sorry. We don't have to pretend like that was real. Okay. So this is actually an older one, and I loved using this in presentations back in the day, trying to explain some of the benefits of being thorough. But the headline is, too much running is tied to shorter lifespan, studies find. Have you guys come across this one?
Holy crap.
What?
Always the last mile you run that kills you.
Yeah.
Boy, if you run it with congestive heart failure followed by
Yeah.
psychosis,
Well,
you're screwed.
Not in a good place.
too much running.
And there's been lots of articles about this one. So there's another that's on Runner's World. This one is running too much will kill you.
Having read that article a long time ago, I have really put that into practice. I'll tell you that right now.
Avoid it. I just avoid it.
I plan to live for a very long time.
This seems like the ones that are like you can overhydrate, like drinking too much while exercising can cause a problem. But I'm trying to. This should be super obvious to me as to why this is factually accurate but absolute garbage, and I'm missing it.
So it's more obvious than you think it was. So the study was low sample sizes, first of all, and it was broken into 3 groups of low running or no running, moderate, high, and then there was the age. And so the group that were older and running at a high amount, whatever the mileage was, like 20 plus miles per week or something, was only 3 people in it. And over the duration of this 10-year study, they died. So it was like mortality rates. They all died. But it was the oldest group, only 3 people. So yeah, it was just this. It was.
I wonder if there's anything wrong with our causal model. No, I don't think so.
Crazy. Well, yeah, because my first question was going to be like, how are they defining too much in the study? Like, how did they even look at, how much are you running, and then control for all those other things? And then we're going to follow. I mean, how long was this study to know that your lifespan was cut short? Who did they control against? Like, that's crazy.
All the questions. But if you look it didn't take too much work for me to put my hands on this one. It was like, too much running will kill you. And I said like circa 2014. And it was like, you'll find so many articles of people like taking this and running with it, no pun intended, or breaking down like why this is like such bad research and not a good steward of research practices or data headlines.
But there is a historical context here, because the guy who ran the very first marathon apparently collapsed and died right afterwards, right? Back in, that was
too much.
Pheidippides or whatever. I don't know.
So the whole distance running movement is actually just a population control design. They're like, this is a good way to.
It's basically a suicide cult.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate.
Did we learn nothing from the ancient Greeks? Like.
Wow.
Oh, that's terrible. That's good. All right. Well, you, as you've been listening, have probably thought of a few headlines you've seen over the years that have been kind of like, what's going on here with this data? If you want to share a couple, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at LinkedIn or on the Measure Slack chat group, or also by email at contact@analyticshour.io, and we'd love to hear from you. And I think Julie, Val, Tim, thanks for doing this. It's been a lot of fun. And it's kind of fun to kind of dig in and kind of look at data from another perspective.
Fun for us.
Yeah, it's just a little mix-up. We did a little switch-up. There's probably a study out there that says listening to too many podcasts is going to kill you also. But until that study comes out, we're going to keep doing podcasts. So, I don't know. Any closing thoughts, anybody?
Check your sources.
Check your sources.
Question everything.
I mean, I will say I thought this was going to be a lot easier to find stuff than it turned out to be. So that actually was
I agree with that.
Somewhat glimmer of a positive, like,
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of these big media they have data journalists. They have been burned in the past. They have become laughing stocks for one reason or another. We should call out that we explicitly said we weren't doing any kind of, political agenda oriented stuff. So putting those aside, reasonably responsible journalism may put out stuff like the ones that we found that were bad were kind of like, yeah, they needed some filler and they found something and stated something silly. But this wasn't, I feel like this was much more egregious 10 or 15 years ago. And there is an increase in responsibility and sophistication inside publications in journalism.
See, I took the other thing, Tim. I was like, they're not even bothering to share good data anymore. That's what I was. I was looking for that article, like you could find like studies, like study shows drinking coffee increases your lifespan, and then another one is like studies show drinking coffee reduces your lifespan. It's like, all right, who's writing these articles?
Well, I mean, it seems like it used to be that some of these media outlets would just like conduct their own research, like just completely irresponsibly go out and ask 20 people on the street, and they would state their conclusion. Now they're generally trying to cite studies. They do caveat them. They do talk to somebody who can speak knowledgeably about their limitations. Headlines are tough.
Yeah. But hopefully this inspires you for the internal headlines you get at work. Maybe question those a little more.
Look at Julie bringing it home. Like this is why you listen to this whole thing.
Full circle moment.
You made it this far.
If you put up with this till the end.
99% of podcast hosts on the Analytics Power Hour think you should pay more attention to your titles.
Yeah. Just my arm doesn't agree.
All right.
Just that point, that 1%.
Well, Mo wasn't here today, so we don't know what her perspective is. Might be totally different.
Oh, she's only 1% out of 5 hosts. Yikes. Dig into that data.
Well, frankly, I just need to understand whether she's using AI or not, to be really honest with you. Before we can really, All right. Listen, this has been fun. It's been a great time hanging out, talking about this stuff. And, of course, no show would be complete without a huge thank you to Josh Crowhurst, our producer, who does all the stuff behind the scenes to make the show possible. And you can catch us on what I said before, and also we've got a YouTube channel now, so check that out, subscribe, do the things that you do on YouTube. It's a good place to see the show happen, too. All right. Well, I think I speak for all my co-hosts here, Val, Julie, and Tim, when I say, no matter what the headline is, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measured Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Do the analytics say go for it no matter who's going for it? So if you and I were on the field, the analytics say go for it. It's the stupidest, laziest, lamest thing I've ever heard for reasoning in competition.
All right. We'll give us a 5 count. We'll get this thing rolling. Of course, this is right when my dogs decide it's time to bark and stuff. I don't know if you can hear that or not.
It's squirrel o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. They're ridiculous. I'm trying to do a podcast. We can just maybe go around. Let's share one, and we can talk about it. I think it'll be kind of fun.
Sounds good.
Who wants to start?
Just run it exactly like we planned and scripted it out.
Yeah,
just stick to the script.
Yeah, but I'm trying to give the impression of spontaneity, Tim.
Oh.
Quite quite a fragile balance.
6 out of 7 podcast hosts agree.
That howdy doody is definitely how you want to start an episode.
It's a fan favorite.
It's a way to start, and
Not wrong.
No, you're not.
Maybe that's what we do, though. Whoever does it gets to pick that. It's like when you pass the
Talking stick.
the talking stick.
What do they call it? Corporate popcorn? That's why I yelled popcorn, and then I said, Michael.
Corporate popcorn.
You've never heard that? I've been on a
I
time
thought
called
that was-
Eric, let's do popcorn.
I thought this is what we bought from the Boy Scouts every Christmas. So it's
It's corporate popcorn. That's how it winds up in the office. Because then you take it in.
corporate
So
popcorn. 3 different flavors, everybody. Help yourself.
He does.
Oh.
Rock flag and eagles live 53% longer than squirrels.
That's a good one.
It's because the squirrels are getting killed by the eagles.
By the eagles. Yeah. And I have this hasty Googling. That is absolute a garbage number. So
You Googled it? That's more responsible. I thought you really just made it up.
it was essentially what turns out there are lots of different types of eagles, lots of different types of squirrels, and lots of broad ranges for all of those. So I eventually said, yeah, I'll make it up.
Tim's so responsible. He couldn't even make it up for a rock flag.
Meta-analysis.
A meta-analysis, a distribution of eagles versus squirrels on a histogram. That's funny.
I'll get back to you on that.
I think we got a super week talk.